Hello. Starting us off today, I'm going to be playing Aminatou Veldpiercer. This is the new Aminatou from Duskmorn. The name of the game here is Miracle. I'm trying to miracle creatures, I'm trying to miracle enchantments, I'm trying to miracle sorceries, and if the instants were any better, I'll be trying to miracle those too. Next up, we have Jeff. He's playing Cayth Famed Mechanist. He's focused on Cayth's Fabricate ability, so he's filled the deck with a bunch of ways to take advantage of having a lot of creatures enter the battlefield. Next, we have Ashley playing Ojer Kaslem, Deepest Growth. She's trying to get her commander out, buff its power so she can deal combat damage, triggering its ability so she can put big creatures into play, along with some lands to help cast big creatures further down the line. And Mark is playing the partner pairing of Ragna and Krav. So this is a life gain deck, but he's trying to gain life on everyone's turn so he can trigger Ragna at each end step to give himself a lot of warriors and flood the board out. He's also got Krav in there to help keep his game plan moving forward when he needs to draw cards. Well, that's going to do it. Let's go ahead and get into the gameplay. I start by playing a Temple of Enlightenment. I leave the card on top and I pass. Jeff plays Flooded Strand. He cracks it. He fetches 4 Ragran Triome and pass. Ashley plays a Forest and pass. Mark plays a Swamp, then he'll pass. I play an Island. Then I cast Scroll Rack so I can control the top of my deck a little bit. Then I pass. Jeff plays a Rugged Prairie and pass. Ashley plays another Forest. Then she casts Sakura Tribelder. She'll pass from there. Mark plays the Plains. Then he casts Arcane Signet. I play a Flooded Strand. I sacrifice it to fetch a Godless Shrine and I shock it in. Then I cast Black Market Connections and pass. Jeff plays Archway of Innovation, which comes in untapped because he has an island. After that, he casts Xenia, Valley's Voice, to give his creatures offspring. Then he moves to his end step. On his end step, Ashley sacrifices Steve. She fetches for a Forest. Starting her turn, she plays a Forest. Then she casts Delighted Halfling. After that, she casts Elvish Visionary, drawing a card when it enters and passing. Mark starts his turn by casting Pristine Talisman. He misses his land drop and passes to me. I start my turn with the Black Market trigger. I pay 6 life. I make a Shapeshifter. I make a Treasure. And I draw a card. Then I cast my commander, Aminatou Veldpiercer. She lets me surveil at upkeep and gives my enchantments Miracle. I play a Swamp from there and I pass. It over to you. Slide on down to the algorithm section, give the video a like, maybe even subscribe to the channel. But really, I pass from there. Jeff plays Prismatic Vista. He cracks it to fetch for an island. Then he casts his commander, Cayth Famed Mechanist. Cayth has and gives Fabricate, so he gets a servo when they enter. Moving to combat, he sends his 2/3 Xenia at Ashley. Ashley starts her turn by casting her commander, Ojer Kaslem Deepest Growth, which lets her sneak in creatures and lands into play for dealing combat damage. She passes her turn after that. Mark plays a Swamp. Then he casts Dark Ritual. He uses that mana to cast one of his commanders, Regna the Redeemer. She gives him creatures at every end step whenever he gains life. Moving to his end step, he gets 2 warrior tokens because he gained life this turn. At his end step, I activate Scroll Rack. I set 2 cards aside and put 2 cards from my library into my hand. Then the cards I put aside goes on top of my library. I leave both cards on top with Aminatou's Surveil. Then I draw and miracle a Treachery for 2 mana. My target for Treachery is Ashley's Ojer Kaslem. I'm going to try to steal it. Ashley responds by casting Snakeskin Veil, giving them hexproof and a +1/+1 counter. Treachery fizzles. With Black Market trigger, I pay 3 life. I make a treasure, and I draw a card. I'll play Raphine's Tower. Then I cast Gift of Immortality, targeting Aminatou. She gets some protection and I pass the turn. Jeff casts Thassa Deep Dwelling. Then he plays Soporific Springs, paying 3 life so it enters untapped. After that he casts Shrieking Drake. It has Fabricate so he gets a servo. Then he returns it to his hand with its ETB. Moving to combat, he sends his 3/3 Xenia at Ashley. At his end step, Thassa triggers. He flickers Xenia, getting another servo from Fabricate. Ashley starts by casting the Skull Spore Nexus. She can double a creature's power, and it gives her tokens when her non-token creatures die. She moves to combat, sending her 7/6 commander at Jeff. Before blockers, she uses the Skull Spore Nexus to double its power. Jeff takes the 14 commander damage. Ojer triggers. She looks at her top 14 cards. She puts a Forest into play, and for a creature, she puts Kura the Boundless Sky into play. This dragon has a death trigger to get lands to her hand or make a big creature upon death. After that terrifying attack, she passes the turn. Mark plays a Plains, then he casts Sunscorched Regent, gaining a life from his talisman. The Regent gets a Timmy counter and gains a life whenever his opponents play Magic. Moving to combat, he sends his 4/4 commander at me with no blocks. At his end step, he gets 2 more tokens because he gained life, and he'll pass. During my upkeep, I activate Scroll Rack. I set 1 card aside for reasons. Then I do the Scroll Rack stuff. I draw into Terminus, which I cast for his Miracle cost. Mark gains life from Sunscorched Region, and all creatures are sent to the bottom of their owner's libraries. Every commander goes to the command zone. Besides Mark's, he lets his go to his library. With Black Market Trigger, I pay 3 life, I make a treasure, and I draw a card. Then I'll cast Hidden Retreat. And after some quick googling, this will be the last time I have this card in this deck list since it has to target and doesn't work how I thought it did. I'll pass the turn after that. Jeff casts War Leader's Call. It's an anthem for all his creatures and it pings the table when his creatures enter. After that, he casts Shrieking Drake. Ashley responds by channeling Boseiju Who Endures to destroy War Leader's Call. Shrieking Drake enters and returns to his hand, dealing no damage. Because War Leader's Call was destroyed, Jeff gets a Plains and passes the turn. Ashley just runs Ojer Kaslem back out and passes the turn. Mark plays a Plains, then he casts Divinity of Pride. It's a flying lifelinker that gets +4/+4 if Mark has 24 or more life. He passes after that. I pay 1 life to Black Market to make a treasure token, then I cast Soaring Lightbringer. It gives my enchantment creatures flying, and whenever I attack an opponent, I make a 1/1 Glimmer. I'll pass the turn from there. Jeff hard casts a Thought Monitor. When it enters, he draws 2 cards. During his end step, Thassa triggers. He flickers the Thought Monitor and draws 2 more cards and pass. Ashley moves right to combat, swinging Ojer at Mark. He blocks it with Soaring Lightbringer. Ashley responds by doubling Ojer Kaslem's power. The Lightbringer dies and Mark gains 4 life. Ashley reveals her top 4 cards. She puts Azusa, Lost But Seeking into play, and a forest. When Ojer dies, it becomes a land. The Skullspore Nexus triggers, and Ashley gets a 12/12 fungus dino. After that, Ashley casts Fanatic of Ronus and moves to end step. During her end step, Mark taps Pristine Talisman to gain 1 life before he starts his turn. Mark starts by casting Thran Dynamo, then he casts his commander number 2, Krav the Unredeemed, which lets him sacrifice creatures to gain life and draw cards. When Krav enters, Mark searches his library for his other commander and put Regna into his hand and pass. With Black Market Trigger, I pay 3 life to draw a card and get a treasure token. Then I play Temple of Deceit. I'll leave that card on top. After that, I cast Copy Enchantment. I choose Soaring Lightbringer. Then I cast Estrid's Invocation, choosing to copy Soaring Lightbringer again. When moving to combat, I send the OG Lightbringer at Mark. When I attack, I get 3 1/1 Glimmers, attacking Mark as well. He doesn't block and takes 7 damage, and I'll pass the turn. Jeff starts by playing Mystic Gate. Then he recasts Cayth Famed Mechanist. He gets a servo from Fabricate. At end step, Thassa flickers Thought Monitor. Jeff gets another servo, and he draws 2 cards. Then the turn goes to Ashley. Ashley pays 3 mana using Temple of Cultivation's ability to transform it back into her commander. From there, she casts Surrak and Goreclaw. They give all of her creatures trample, plus her non-token creatures enter with a Timmy counter and haste. Moving to combat, she sends the 12/12 trample fungus at Mark. Using the Skullspore Nexus, she doubles its power. He doesn't block and he takes 24 damage, and Ashley passes. Mark casts Ranger of Eos. When it enters, he tutors for 2 creatures with mana value 1 or less. He searches for Soul's Attendant and Soul Warden. Then he casts the Soul Warden he tutored for. After that, he casts Regal Bloodlord. It's a flyer and gives him a 1/1 flying bat at the end of each end step if he gained life that turn. It's like a smaller version of his commander. From there, he moves to end step, making a bat and gaining a life from Soul Warden. Also, during his end step, I activate Scroll Rack to do the thing. Starting my turn, I Miracle into Redress Fate. I return Treachery and Gift of Immortality from my graveyard to play. I enchant Soaring Lightbringer with Gift of Immortality. Then I enchant Mark's Soul Warden with Treachery. When Treachery enters, I untap up to 5 lands. With Black Market's trigger, I pay 2 life to draw a card. I move to combat, sending a Soaring Lightbringer at each opponent. I get 9 Glimmers entering, 3 attacking each of my opponents. My original 3 Glimmer tokens also go at Ashley. Jeff takes 6 damage, killing one of my 1/1s. Ashley takes 10 damage. Mark takes 2 damage, killing 2 of my 1/1s. Thanks to Soul Warden, I gain 9 life. After that, I pass the turn. Now, I'm going to have a lot of Soul Warden triggers. I'll gain the life, but I won't narrate each trigger. Jeff casts Miss Metal Vanisher. When it becomes tapped, Jeff can exile permanents until end step. It fabricates, so he gets a servo token. Then he casts Knight Errant of Eos. He convokes it for 5. Miss Metal Vanisher is tapped, so Jeff exiles Thought Monitor. Thanks to Fabricate, he also gets another servo. Knight Errant lets him look at his top 6 cards and put 2 creatures with mana value 5 or less into his hand. He reveals a Silver Myrrh and a Kalpakal first among equals. He casts a Kalpakal first among equals. He gets another servo. A Kalpakal reads, at the beginning of each player's end step, if an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Then he plays Arid Mesa. He moves to his end step. Thought Monitor returns. A Kalpakal triggers. Thassa triggers. And Fabricate happens a bunch. He does the Akapakal first. He puts 1 card into his hand and 1 into his graveyard. He draws 2 cards. He gets a servo. Thassa blinks Thought Monitor. He draws 2 more cards. Then he gets another servo and passes the turn after discarding down a hand size. Ashley starts by casting Tornado Elemental. When it enters, it deals 6 damage to each creature with flying, and it can assign combat damage as though it weren't blocked. Thanks to Sirach and Goreclaw, it enters with a Timmy counter and haste. Each creature with flying takes 6 damage. My Soaring Lightbringer comes back into play thanks to Gift of Immortality. Moving to combat, Ashley sends the 12/12 Fungus at Jeff, the 7/7 Tornado at me, along with her commander. I respond by casting Cyclonic Rift Overloaded. Some people might not like it, but I love a one-sided board wipe. Everyone picks up their non-land permanents. Then Ashley recasts her commander and moves to end step. Jeff cracks Arid Mesa at her end step. He gets Elegant Parlor into play. He surveils Claim Jumper into his graveyard. Then Gift of Immortality comes back and enchants Soaring Lightbringer. Mark plays a Plains. Then he casts Erebos, God of the Dead. His opponents can't gain life, and he can pay 2 and 2 life to draw a card. Then he casts Soul's Attendant, so he can start gaining life again. After that, he casts Regna the Redeemer again, gaining a life from Soul's Attendant, and a life from the Talisman. He moves to his end step, makes 2 tokens, and gains another 2. On my turn, I cast Lochthwain's Scorn, giving Soul's Attendant -3/-3, almost forgetting about Black Market. I pay 6 life, I make a Shapeshifter, I make a treasure, and I draw a card. After that, I cast Smothering Tithe. I won't say all these triggers either, but you'll see my hoard of treasures building up over here. Moving to combat, I send my 4/5 Soaring Lightbringer at Ashley. I get a 1/1 Glimmer, Ashley takes 5, and I pass. Jeff plays a Plains. He doesn't pay his Smothering Tithe taxes. Then he casts his commander. He gets a servo token. After that, he casts a Gate Instigator, paying its offspring cost. He stacks the triggers so the Agate offspring sees the servo enter. With that, he deals 3 damage to the table. From there, he recasts the Knight Errant of Eos, convoking it for 5 again. He gets another servo. We take 4 damage from the Agate Instigators. He looks at his top 6 cards. He reveals Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, and Benny Brock's Zoologist. He puts both into his hand. After that, he convokes Benny Brock's Zoologist. He gets another servo, dealing another 4 damage to the table. He draws at his end step and passes the turn after discarding. Ashley starts her turn casting Defiler of Vigor. It lets her discount green spells and puts Timmy counters on creatures whenever she casts green permanents. Then she'll recast the Skullspore Nexus, putting a Timmy counter on her creatures. Moving to combat, she sends her 7/6 commander at Jeff. Jeff responds by casting Flare of Fortitude, sacrificing a white creature. His life total can't change, and his permanents have hexproof and indestructible. Ashley uses the Nexus to double her commander's power. Sadly, the commander damage still ends up taking Jeff out of the game, even though his life total can't change. Mark casts Ranger of Eos. He can search for 2 creatures with mana value 1 or less. He gets Guide of Souls and Mother of Runes. Then, Mark casts the Guide of Souls. Whenever another creature enters under his control, he gains a life and gets an energy. I won't narrate all the triggers here either, but trust me, they happen. After that, he casts Krav the Unredeemed, gaining a life from the Talisman and the Guide. Moving to combat, he sends his 4/4 Flying Commander at Ashley, unblocked. He moves to end step and makes 2 tokens, gaining more life and energy before passing the turn. With Black Market, I pay 3 life, I get a treasure, and I draw a card. I'll start by using Scroll Rack. I put 3 cards to the side to put 3 cards into my hand. Then I cast Hallowed Haunting. As long as you control 7 or more permanents, creatures you control have flying and vigilance. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, create a white spirit cleric creature token with this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of spirits you control. From there, I cast Mirror Maid, making another Soaring Lightbringer. I get a spirit token, then I cast Darksteel Mutation targeting Mark's Krav. I get another spirit. He responds by sacrificing his 4 soldiers and Krav to draw 5 cards and gain 5 life. Then I cast Blind Obedience. I get another spirit. I move to combat and send 8 damage at Ashley in the air. I also send 3 damage in the air at Mark. All my creatures have vigilance, so actually don't tap to attack. The 3 glimmers that entered should be tapped, but it doesn't impact the game at all. And from there, I move to end step. Mark gets 2 soldiers since he gained life that turn. He starts his turn playing a swamp. Then he casts Mother of Runes. After that, he casts Dire Sight. He surveils 2, drawing both. He'll cast a Soul Ring. Then he moves to his end step. He gets 2 more soldiers, gaining 2 more life and energy. I start my turn with Black Market. I pay 2 life and draw a card. Then I cast Entity Tracker to draw whenever an enchantment enters on my side of the field. From there, I cast Moonblessed Cleric. When it enters, I search for Starfield of Nyx. I put that on top of my library. Then I cast Propaganda. I'll get a spirit. Then I draw a card. From there, I cast the Starfield of Nyx I just drew. I can return an enchantment to play from my graveyard during my upkeep, and it turns all my non-aura enchantments into creatures with a power and toughness equal to their mana value. I draw a card when it enters, and I forget to make a spirit. Moving to combat, I send everything in the air at Mark. I get 2 more glimmers, and I draw 2 cards from Entity Tracker. From there, we realize my glimmers should immediately die because Starfield of Nyx makes their power and toughness 0. Mark responds to my attackers by casting Beacon of Immortality, using the talisman and gaining a life. He doubles his life total. He ends up taking enough damage to take him down to 6 life. Beacon of Immortality gets shuffled back into his library, and I move to my end step. Because Mark gained life, he gets 2 more soldiers and gains more life. He plays a Plains, then he casts Krav the Unredeemed again. After that, he uses Krav's ability to sacrifice 8 creatures, including Krav. He gains 8 life and draws 8 cards. From there, he casts Sensei's Divining Top. He activates it to look at his top 3 cards and put them back in his chosen order. Then he casts Exsanguinate, where X equals 4. He gains 4 and I lose 4, and he moves to his end step, making 2 more soldiers. I move straight to combat and send everything at Mark to close out the game. That's going to wrap up the game this week. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, remember to go ahead and like and subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you at the table.